You're listening to a CNA podcast.
It's that time of year when the world's leaders, government negotiators, global financiers, and industry heavyweights come together to thrash out plans to save the planet. It's called COP, the UN's Climate Change Summit, and it's just a few days away. Why should you care? Today, we'll tell you why and have a fun little debate about the choice of host city. Hi, and welcome to Climate Conversations. I'm Jack Board. Hello, Liling Tan. How are you?
Hi, Jack. I'm very well. How are you?
I'm good. Getting ready to travel. Climate nerd hat on. Are you getting psyched for COP?
Absolutely. It's like Christmas for climate dorks like you and I, right? Can't wait to hear all the exciting news about climate financing, implementation of Article 6, the operationalization of loss and damage funding, and the very exciting, wait for this, drum roll, national collective quantified goals. Where do they come up with these sexy, catchy names, huh?
I think I prefer regular Christmas.
Don't we all? All right, but this is your fourth COP, though. You're quite a veteran here. You sick of it yet?
No, I'm not sick of it. Look, sometimes we poke fun at these processes and how elevated the discussions tend to be removed from the real world. But I still do believe that they are important. It's the fourth time, for me. I wouldn't say I'm a veteran. I always run into people there who have been to 15 COPs or they've been going since 2000. And so you still feel like a bit of a rookie speaking to some of those people. But I'm looking forward to this one in Baku.
And this COP is also being looked at as a technical COP, right? So it's not really the fun, party-going, the more exciting, extravagant kind of COPs that we've seen in the past before, right?
I'm not sure if any of them are party-going. I am interested in a few of the wine bars that Baku has to offer.
No, but I mean,
on the downtime.
But it's the turnout's going to be slightly more muted this year than in previous years. I think if I remember correctly, there were some articles about how fewer private companies and entities will be attending. Somebody even just said, we're waiting to see if the cool kids go, and if they go, maybe we'll go.
Yeah, totally. You're right. It's going to be technical. It's going to be implementation focused. It's not going to be big grandstanding and big announcements about climate targets. All the countries are going to be saving that for next year. Look, I'm really interested in loss and damage, obviously, because it affects our region a lot. There's a big focus on finding money that the developing world needs. So I think that's going to be front and center for our coverage. All right, let's start with our quiz. It's going to be focused on Azerbaijan. What do you know about it? Now, I've been there a couple of times already, so I'm just going to give you some fun facts. Let's see if I can get you excited about the host nation, even though we've just downplayed how important this COP might be.
It's still important, yes.
Yeah. Azerbaijan is called the Land of Fire. It has a bunch of mud volcanoes. There's 400 of them. And this kind of nickname has only been enhanced by its deep connections to oil. Now, it also has the world's oldest carpet museum. Interesting, right? It's a cool looking building that looks like a rolled up carpet. And it shows off. It does, yeah. And it shows off the kind of the country's deep heritage of carpet weaving. So I thought that was cool. And it's home to the world's largest lake, which is
the Caspian Sea.
Beautiful Caspian Sea, which is around the size of Japan, which is crazy.
Yeah.
All right, I've given you lots of facts, but now the question. Can you tell me how many countries the Caspian Sea borders and what those countries are?
Oh, geography. Whoopee. Okay, Azerbaijan, of course, but yeah, I have an idea about a couple of other countries.
We say as Liling goes and picks up her atlas.
No, hands right up here.
All right, answers will be at the end. Okay, news time. What stories have you picked out for us this week?
I've got a 2-for-1 this week, and it's about the pricing of chocolate during this peak holiday chocolate buying period. So it's getting more expensive, and guess what the culprit is? Yes, climate change. It has been taking a huge chunk out of the supply of chocolate's key ingredient, the cocoa bean. And CNA's global team did 2 separate stories on this the past month. One looks at the impact on cocoa makers in Ghana, which is, of course, the second largest cocoa producing country in the world after the Ivory Coast. And the other story looks at the consumption end of it, chocolate buying in the United Kingdom. Now, here's a clip from Nabil Ahmed Rufai in Ghana, who looked at the story from the production angle.
For the past 3 years, cocoa farmers in Ghana have been struggling to meet their production targets. They say long dry spells linked to climate change is among the factors contributing to the poor harvest. The crippling droughts followed extensive rainfall and flooding that dealt a double blow to cocoa farmers. Pests and plant diseases, illegal mining and smuggling activity also took huge chunks out of the supply.
Now, cocoa prices soared, hitting record levels earlier this year. It's now double what it was since January. And the higher cost is already trickling down to chocolate markets and retailers around the world. And the UK is definitely one of them feeling the pinch. Here's John Beaver reporting out of Bristol.
The first mass-produced chocolate bars were made here in Bristol in southwest England in 1847. It transformed chocolate from a luxury item to a more affordable treat. But in recent years, prices have risen sharply. Since 2010, this bar of dairy milk has got smaller, but the price has almost doubled to just under £2. That's around $2.50. The manufacturers have blamed inflation and rising costs. But the price of cocoa is also a problem. These gold coins, which are hugely popular during the festive season, have gone up by 10% since last Christmas.
And it looks like supply is still being hammered by erratic weather and rainfall, so prices will likely stay up there. Now, it's making me think about Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, isn't it, Jack?
Sure, if you say so.
It's like, oh no, we can't afford chocolate. We'll have to share and ration.
How's your daughter going to feel about that?
Oh, goodness. She's getting so much of a fill right now from leftover chocolate candy from Halloween. It is insane.
Okay, it's time for our main story this week. We're talking COP29, and we'll have a debate soon and hear from the CEO of the summit in an exclusive interview. But first, let's go straight to why the world is watching this COP and why you, the earthly citizens, should also care about it.
Jack, you mentioned earlier that you're about to head out, right? You're flying out to Baku tomorrow night, no, to cover this?
Yep. Bags are being packed.
Oh, awesome. And you've also been working on a few preview stories ahead of the summit, and one of them is on the 5 things that we need to know. Now, looking at this, number 1, this COP is really about climate financing, right? That's the overarching theme?
Yep. Show me the money. As I wrote in the story, yeah, look, finance is going to be the central pillar of the talks. And perhaps of most importance will be the negotiations around what you mentioned earlier, the new collective quantified goal. Get ready. You're going to be hearing a lot about that.
Woohoo!
Yep. So basically, it's a financial framework that's going to replace this $100 billion in climate finance that advanced economies have been promising to give poorer nations every year. And that's basically been a fail. Mm-hmm. And so this new NCQG, what a catchy name, NCQG is going to be aiming even higher, we think. So that's going to be a watch. They're going to try and mobilize even more money. And then, as I mentioned, loss and damage, which is money that is meant for countries bearing the brunt of climate change, will also be one of our focuses. And countries like the Philippines have been really leading the charge on that.
Loss and damage, and say it with me together, NCQG. Yay, remember that. Okay, moving on to number 2. Now, all of this is set against a backdrop of a hot planet and one where the weather is getting increasingly warmer. Now, things haven't improved on that front in this past year where we saw some record high temperatures. We've spoken multiple times about this, hurricanes, floods, and of course, the erratic weather patterns. Right? How much of this is going to factor in, Jack?
Yeah, I mean, global temperatures have continued to rise. Surface and ocean temperatures have both hit record highs this year. And when we look at the concentrations of carbon dioxide and methane, they're also at all-time high levels in the atmosphere. And this 1.5 degrees barrier that all of this is meant to prevent, we've breached it this year.
Yes.
So all of this is the backdrop to these talks.
So number 3, of course, is the big question. Could this be the end of fossil fuels? For every COP, it's been a point of contention. Can we make the needle move?
I don't think so. No.
This from our in-house optimist.
Yeah, look, simply put, fossil fuel production has continued to rise, just like the temperatures. And Azerbaijan itself is a petrostate. 90% of its exports are oil and gas, and it's in charge of all of these talks. Last year, there was this mention of transitioning away from fossil fuels in the final COP agreement, so we know that there are going to be disputes again about some of that language in the final statement out of the summit.
Okay. Number 4, this COP is taking place at a time of multiple conflicts. It's been evidently a shocking year for wars. We've got Ukraine, the escalating crisis in the Middle East, and of course, the protracted Sudan conflict. Now, is all of that taking attention away from climate action and the principle of cooperation and consensus in Baku?
Yeah, I think there's a high chance that that is the case. And the likely outcome, I think, is simply less ambition at this summit. There'll be less money and more distrust. And so that doesn't really bode well for a very successful COP, if we're being brutally honest here. Experts have told me that this level of conflict is unprecedented since the UNFCCC was set up in 1992. Having said all that, the organisers in Baku are really pushing peace as a central theme this year for the first time, so we'll see if that makes any impacts on decisions.
Jack, you mentioned the UNFCCC, and just so everybody is aware, that is the UN, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. COP is under the UNFCCC. So the last one, number 5, my favorite of all, carbon trading. Now, this is a very complex topic, but we could see finally the global rule book for Article 6 sorted out, yes?
Yeah, maybe. It's been a decade in the making, so everybody is, I think, optimistic that Article 6 might finally be completed. Now, it covers the rules for international carbon markets, which can be used by countries to meet their emissions reductions targets. So let's say you, the nation of Liling, wants to pollute more. Yeah, you could buy credits from me, the nation of Jack, if I've done things like preserving my rainforests, for example, and I have credits to sell you. So the idea is that eventually it's cheaper for you to decarbonize than having to keep buying those offsets from me. Super simple explanation. Article 6 really goes deep into lots of different areas. So we'll be watching that as well.
I really like that explanation. The nation of Liling versus the nation of Jack.
Not versus, they're working together.
The nation of
They're
Liling
complementary.
and the nation of Jack buying and selling carbon credits to meet our net zero targets. That's nice.
All right, next, I want you to hear from one of the central figures of COP29. It's the CEO and a deputy energy minister of Azerbaijan, Elnur Soltanov. Now, I interviewed him in Baku at the COP29 HQ, which is located in the White City, which is a part of Baku that was once condemned due to contamination from oil extraction. And those oil fields are still everywhere, mind you, but they have cleaned up this part of the city now. It's a bit of a showcase for the organisers. I started by asking him what Azerbaijan can bring to the table on climate as the COP president.
And of course, the green transitioning in general, because global warming and climate change is not just about energy sphere. Of course, we have agricultural sphere, we have industry, we have waste management issues out there. But again, we are very happy. We take pride in the fact that this is kind of very nicely fits into the history, into the narrative of the country in general. What are the expectations? I think we like it or not, this is finance will be at the core of this year's climate negotiations. And as you know, there are two major tracks. One is negotiation track, and we don't have much. This is basically UNFCCC-led process. They tell us what our mandates are, and basically we are helping the United Nations Convention on Climate Change to advance the topics that they should advance, and by hosting and also by co-leading process with them. And finance is important, and I think it will be a very significant issue. It's at the forefront, and as you know, of the around dozens of issues, NCQG definitely looms large. But our position is this, and vision-wise, we expressed this several times already. Finance cannot be understood in abstract terms. Finance is there to enable action, enable climate action. And by climate action, we mean really both mitigation, adaptation. So basically the motto of the negotiation track, I would say, is enhance ambition and enable action. And enabling action basically means that if we want to have that kind of collective and bold action in climate, we need support, we need enablers, we need means of implementation. And as you know, we have finance, technology, and capacity building, and finance definitely is the most important thing out there.
As an important oil and gas producer and exporter, does being the host of COP add pressure to your domestic energy strategy, or conversely add opportunities to your domestic energy strategy?
Yeah, I mean, Jack, as we talked like at the start, the entire world economy is based on hydrocarbons. We like it or not, that's a matter of fact. And every country in the world is an oil country, either producer country or consumer country or both. We are basically currently producing around 0.5% of gas and 0.5% of oil. And our oil production levels are going down. And this is also part of the deliberate policy by the government, because Caspian is really rich in terms of natural resources, including hydrocarbons, but there is more and more shift towards natural gas and green energy. Azerbaijan commissioned the biggest solar power plant in the entire region in October last year. And by 2027, in the installed capacity, the share of renewables will go up to 30%, also a very, very significant number in our region, definitely. I should also tell you that we are really looking at not what you are doing currently in terms of hydrocarbons, but what you can contribute to tackling climate crisis. So this is the measure that we look at ourselves and at others. What can you bring to the table to tackle the climate crisis we are facing? Because we can really lose it all. And for us, the target should be, as I said before, 1.5. Again, the possibility of overshoot is quite high. But as the first global stocktake at COP28 made it very clear, the current indices, current plans are not enough. We need course correction, and that is 1.5. The target North Star should be 1.5. And we are asking everybody, and first and foremost ourselves, what, if we have experience in oil and gas business, right, historically speaking, what is that technology-wise? And we saw that in COP28 as well, right? Technology-wise, there are a lot of things, experience-wise, a lot of things they can help us to advance the tackling of climate crisis. And again, one more time, this is the measure if we look at ourselves and to others, what you can bring to the table. If that's the experience in the hydrocarbon sector, perfect. As long as in good faith, you are utilizing all those resources, again, to handle, to solve the problem that we are facing in terms of climate.
How are global events impacting climate talks and negotiations and the mobilization of these finances that you talk about? Conflicts, for example, in Ukraine, in Gaza, and important elections that have happened this year as well.
I think even historically this year will be standing out in terms of how many people went to ballot boxes all over the world. But again, our position is that time is short. Resources are always not enough, especially given the task that we are facing. And therefore, we don't have much attention to spare on things that we cannot control, right? Elections will happen. This is the normal situation in the world. Unfortunately, conflicts are continuing. And in fact, one of the main action agenda items for us is the nexus between peace and climate. We attach a lot of importance to that because Azerbaijan's presidency became possible when Azerbaijan and Armenia supported each other. And we have been over conflict for over 30 years. And for us, this is something to capitalize upon and move forward. But again, back to your question, we focus on things that we have mandate on and that we can change, and that's leading climate negotiations and also making sure that on presidential action agenda, COP presidency action agenda, those 14 items that probably are going to be talking about, at least in some of them we can move forward, because negotiations being negotiations and requiring consensus, fine, and we believe that there will be significant outcomes, but any step taken forward matters. Even half a step forward matters, and for that we have action agenda items. Again, we are really laser focused on things that we can do, and hopefully we are going to deliver.
That was my chat with Elnur Soltanov. Now we're going to take off our climate nerd hats for a bit. We're going to put on our opinion hats. It's something we don't always get to do as journalists, but just for the sake of this debate. And it's a big issue that I always hear, you always hear. People ask, should fossil fuel giants be chosen to lead these climate talks? And this year will be the third time in a row, following on from the UAE and Egypt. For the sake of debate, in the affirmative, we have you, Liling. I'll take the negative. Make your case for their involvement and their leadership of these climate summits.
Okay. So these petrostates, major oil-producing countries, they are the culprits when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions and carbon emissions. So they need to be part of the solution in a significant way. And in order to really have any kind of traction in hitting global warming targets, they need to be a big part of the conversation. And just making available renewable and alternative energy or investing in it isn't enough if people can still easily access affordable gas, oil, and coal. And so in order to get them on board and reduce fossil fuel and phase out fossil fuel production, we need them at the table, we need them on board, and we need them to drive part of this transition because that's what it takes.
Okay, I hear you. I agree to an extent that they have to be part of the solution. But should they be actually in charge of these summits? That's a different level of involvement. That's a different level of influence that countries that have, let's face it, vested interests, conflicts of interest in continuing the status quo and the world's dependency on their resources that, of course, they want to sell to us. The stability of their economy is totally tied to ensuring that oil and gas continues to be produced. And we know that they are leading causes for global warming. And when they are in the driver's seats, I believe that they have too much say over how much progress can be made. And we are shooting ourselves in the foot a bit by not enhancing ambition, which ironically is one of the taglines of Azerbaijan's presidency.
Right. Okay. So let's look at it this way. We need them as hosts, or we stand to gain from them as hosts of these COP summits, because by putting them in that spotlight, we are in a way holding them to account, right? They are forced to really weigh the impacts of their fossil fuel production, of their economies driven by this, and look at opportunities or to galvanize opportunities for their own transition. I think there is a recognition that climate change is a reality and that things need to start changing. But we also have to remember that at the end of the day, companies are profit-making, or they're supposed to be profit-making. It's all about the bottom line. They're not activists. They're not doing this out of the collective good of the planet. And maybe the intent is there, but ultimately at the end of the day, they have to answer to shareholders and they have to make money.
Yeah, but the companies are not in charge of COP. The governments are in charge of COP. So too much power in the hands of the companies, which are often state entities, I think is a mistake. And what that also allows is these huge numbers of fossil fuel industry representatives from these nations that kind of blur the lines between representing the government and representing companies. They can dominate the discussions, they dilute the climate action proposals that other nations could put forward.
But imagine the alternative when you have these petrostates who are just there being dictated to and mandated to by other governments who feel that they are in a better place and they know better. How receptive do you think these petrostates would be in that scenario?
That's fine. They're a powerful bloc as it is. And I should say we would include countries like the United States in this equation, often criticized for a lack of leadership in this space. On another topic, and this is a big generality, but something else in common from the last 3 COPs is a human rights issue. The lack of public expression, the inability to report freely about these industries and these issues. And that definitely has made covering COP much more difficult. I think that's something else that needs to be taken into account if we are putting scrutiny on the presidency of COP, yet we cannot report freely about what they're actually up to.
I think, yes, the human rights factor is a huge issue, which is why the onus should be on a lot of the other organizations and entities to hold these petrostates and companies to account. And the more they are driving these summits, the more they put themselves under the spotlight for greater scrutiny. And I think that can be a positive thing when it comes to moving the needle on the green transition.
Okay, interesting discussion. We actually put up an opinion poll on LinkedIn asking people what they thought. Should fossil fuel giants be chosen to lead climate talks? And indicative of the divisiveness of this discussion, 50% said yes, we need them, and 50% said no, too much influence. So yeah, goes to show that people are on both sides of this debate. And we'd love you guys to connect with us on social media as well.
So if you have a thought or an opinion, please share it with us.
cnapodcasts at mediacorp.com.sg as well if you want to get in touch. Okay, we're also adding a little new bite-sized weather look ahead to the lineup in the podcast this week. Liling, put on your weather
My
woman.
meteorologist.
Your
You want to see me
meteorologist hat.
Yeah.
Take it away.
All right, guys, rainy with a chance of crazy. Expect wetter, rainier end to the year across most of Southeast Asia as the region enters the monsoon season. So low-lying areas may need to brace for more flooding, and high mountainous regions may have to prepare for possibilities of landslides. Indonesia, however, may buck this expectation, with the current dry and hot conditions there likely to hold for a bit longer due to tropical cyclones forming in the Pacific Ocean, disrupting rain and wind activity. And that's your weather forecast from Climate Conversations.
All right, quiz time. Let's repeat the question. What are the bordering nations of the Caspian Sea? And even I have to think pretty carefully about this, even though I just did a big feature story on it. Lots of people, when I tell them I'm going to Azerbaijan, they don't even know where that is. Do you, Liling?
Yeah, I do know where that is. And in terms of the countries surrounding Caspian Sea, I may not know all of them. We know Azerbaijan is what? Looking at it, lower left of it on the western side. And south of that, we know Iran is there. I know Iran is there. And then to the north of Azerbaijan, we have Russia, because it used to be, it's a former Soviet state. Russia's up there. And, okay, so the northeast part, I'm a little
Now
hazy.
you've got the stans. Which of the stans?
So it's definitely not Afghanistan because that's further away. We've got Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan. And Kazakhstan's further away too, I think. So it's either Uzbekistan or Turkmenistan, or both.
Turkmenistan is correct.
Yay!
And the last one was Kazakhstan.
Oh, okay. So I got those two confused.
It's a big country. So 4 out of 5. Good effort.
Got it. That was fun.
Okay, that's it for this episode of Climate Conversations. Thanks as always for listening in. We'll see you next week.
Yeah, see you all back here, same time, same place, next week. I'm Liling Tan.
And I'm Jack Board. Thanks as always to the team that put together this podcast, Arjun Bala, Tiffany Ang, Janani Jahari, and Crispina Roberts.